that is the massively improved launch control of this brand new J1.2 Taycan GTS facelift. Guys, I'm your host Raz. Welcome to RBR's new Rapid Reviews, a short but sharp take on your favorite cars. And today is all about Taycan's Goldilocks new GTS. It has been by far the most popular and sought after of the Taycan variants in the past version, and now it comes with big improvements in terms of power, range and efficiency. But this was a car that in pre-facelift everybody said was the best mix. I disagreed, I thought it was the 4S. Today, let's check out whether this facelift has brought enough to give the GTS the position it deserves, which is the best of the bunch. And to do that, let us first stop and deconstruct the new Taycan together. Well, that's pretty cool, isn't it? And this is one of the main things about this car that make it better than the predecessor. And the predecessor was a car called the J1 Taycan. I don't know if you guys know, but it had a code name. And the J1 has now been improved in this J1.2 new facelift. Now, before we get into the GTS, let's talk about what's changed on the standard facelift of the Taycan, because it's now better in power, it's better in range, and it's better in efficiency. And it all starts with the batteries, which are brand new NMC batteries, which are nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries. They're lighter than they were before, but now come in bigger sizes. So we've got 82 kilowatt as standard, and then 97 usable as our second option. And these now charge faster as well, up to 320 kilowatts, particularly in that sweet spot of 10 to 80%, where we want to get all our charge back, and much more range than previously, even in this GTS, as I will show you later. Next we come to the motors, which is the big improvement here. We've got a whole new motor on the rear that is providing that extra 107 horsepower improvement. How? Well, we've got a new larger motor there, which has got stronger magnets, it's got improved stator wiring, and that is giving us that massive power bump across all of the Taycans. Then our power inverter has been upgraded for better efficiency and power delivery, and then recouping the power on braking has been improved from 290 kilowatt to 400 kilowatt, which is great. So when you're slowing down, you're getting a lot more power back now as well. And all of this amounts to a massive increase, not just in power, but also in range, with our standard Taycan going from the mid 250s, 270, all the way up past 400. And as I'll show you in a minute, this GTS has really benefited from this as well. And we still have a whole host of different Taycan models leading all the way to the insane attack mode Turbo GT, and all of them have seen a massive increase in power. And that's something that's especially important for our GTS today. Now for the GTS, the great news is the power bump. If we look at the previous one, this car had 510 horsepower, then would overboost up to 590. And I found in my own tests that that still kept it pretty close to 4S in real world usage, as we'll talk about later. This one starts close to 600 and goes up to 700 PS. And you can see the 0 to 60 has now improved also from 3.7 to 3.3, which is damn impressive as well. So really benefiting from the efficiency upgrades that have come in the facelift. But I think the best thing about the GTS, and it's in fact an optional extra, is to do with the suspension. Our standard suspension is the 2-valve damping suspension that is new, and it's come out of the new Panamera as we tested it, and it's actually a really good system, very adaptive, really good for both comfort driving and for sportier driving. It's got a good breadth. But the one with the huge breadth of ability is Porsche's Active Ride suspension. It's around about a £6,500 option, which sounds a lot, but this completely revolutionizes the way that heavier cars are able to interact with rougher road surfaces and be much more dynamic, as if they were 200 to 300 kg lighter. And the way that they do this is through the use of really clever valve technology. And the way it does it is through active shock absorbers with 2-valve technology and a hydraulic pump per each wheel, which allows the car to react 13 times per second to compression and rebound. So whether it's comfort, it's absolutely epic, and whether it's actually controlling the body of the car, like we saw with Panamera, it can lean back when it comes into braking, it can dip down when it comes into acceleration, just like a helicopter moves, just like we saw on the Panamera, and essentially gives this car absolutely unlimited body control, which is why then it can also do things like this. It's so easy to then get in and get out of the car at this height because the Taycan's quite a low car. Sometimes it's even reminiscent of a 911, but thus makes this that much better in every single scenario that you would use this car. So while that 6,200 odd pounds seems a lot, really, for a car like the GTS, it's needed. Then we come to the design, which is an interesting one. As you guys know, it's got a newly designed front end. The most obvious thing are your new headlights. You've got a redesigned front bumper as well. And for the first time ever, we now have a lighted up rear Porsche logo in the rear light bar, which is an optional extra and looks really cool. It's on this car as well, and I love it. What's interesting though, Porsche now starting to differentiate their body styles. Previously, the old GTS could have the body of the turbo, as could your standard Taycan, and you could have the sport design kit and it would look exactly like the turbo. Now you can't do that. Now the sports design kit is just that lower bit. It's almost blink and miss it. And now the turbo sits apart with a completely different aerodynamic front end. You've got more slats and stuff on the rear bumper as well. So they're starting to differentiate them more. We saw this with 911 as well, with the GTS getting its own body versus the standard Carrera and the Carrera S, and now turbo probably going to get its own look as well. And I think this is a good thing. I think that they should be differentiated, because if you're spending turbo money, it shouldn't look like a GTS or below. That being said, GTS does look good. Everything comes out blacked out as we are used to in GTS models. This is of course your Sport Turismo, which I think is the best version that you can get. The boot actually has practicality, so if you even want the P from practicality, go for the Sport Turismo, because the saloon just doesn't have that much space. Right, now let's head inside and let's look at the interior, which actually is probably the best part of the GTS. Now, jumping in the interior of our newly facelifted GTS, the best surprise is the range figure. Now bear in mind that the temperature at the moment, it's 4 degrees, 5 degrees, and when I tested this car last time, it was no more than 200 in the winter months, okay? And to be 250 just shows you what a massive increase in efficiency, because that increase in just the battery size wouldn't do it. It has to be everything else, and Porsche have done a fantastic job on that. Of course, the GTS has a lovely interior that's been so nicely trimmed. It really is the standout of the bunch in the entire Taycan series, particularly if you like the use of race text and these sportier materials like this pattern within our seats here. The GTS logos, the unique GTS steering wheel, which only this one gets. And you even get GTS in the lovely driver zone. We're not going to do a deep dive into this system yet. We will do that when I test drive the standard Taycan. But in terms of just the GTS, you can see it stands apart in terms of the way it's trimmed. You get all of the benefits of so much more being standard in the normal Taycan now. We've got steering assist now as standard, ambient lighting, folding mirrors. You've got the Porsche Intelligent Range Manager. We've got an all-new cooling system. We've got wireless charging with cooling as well. So lots more value added if you're going into this new facelift. But of course, what we want to know for GTS is, what is the drive like with that added power? So let's head out now and find out. So it's quite funny that the last German press car that I drove in the UK from Porsche was the pre-facelift J1 Taycan GTS in Sport Turismo form in red. And obviously that was way back in COVID, where we didn't have press drives, etc., so they sent cars down here. It's just ironic that here I am once again in the Taycan GTS Sport Turismo. So one of my original complaints with that particular car was that when we did the launch control test, we got a 0 to 60 time of 3.5 seconds, and I was either matching that or bettering it in my Taycan 4S. And while, don't get me wrong, there was so much great about the GTS in terms of the fact that it's simply just sportier in terms of its suspension setup. You had the unique sound, the unique body, etc. But in terms of pure speed, particularly because this is an electric car and you can't really differentiate like you can with combustion engines, I just felt the 4S was the Goldilocks and the GTS wasn't. And the GTS was really meant to be the Goldilocks. This car with the added power, let there be no doubt that it's definitely helping. To see just how much it's helping, let us test it properly and time the launch control. It's a bit wet out here, but still, let's do it and see what we get versus the previous car. Right, here we go. Oh, it's difficult in the wet. It's difficult. So even in the wet, we're achieving a time of 3.3 seconds 0.2 better than the previous car, which I did in the dry. It's in the wet, and yes, it's the exact figures rather than being improved upon it, but I'm sure in the dry that this would absolutely smash it. There was quite a bit of wheel spin when we took off, and I could see this being 3 dead or maybe even under. So this is massively improved, and it's something that you feel behind the wheel as well. Then of course you've got this mad push to pass button, which just buries you in the seat with the full power of this system, and it is breathtaking. It is just so fun to do. I just wish they'd triple down on it with the sound element. They really need to do that, but they're not. Porsche, I think, really missing a trick here where why not add some electric sound if someone like me or you wants it? Speed now just feels so much closer to the turbo. And I like that in the GTS. You need that in the GTS. You know, those 3 letters mean a lot in every other Porsche variation, and I felt in Taycan, though, it felt more special. The fact that it was still so close to 4S just didn't sit well with me. Now, I don't think it will be. Yes, of course, the new 4S has seen a power upgrade as well, but I think this plus the sportier suspension treatment here and the use of the Active Ride is gonna this car never fails to surprise me, the Taycan. It's the only electric car, perhaps outside of that brilliantly fun Hyundai Ioniq, that can really just put a smile on your face immediately. And GTS in sport mode with the active suspension, it's a force to be reckoned with. Insane amount of speed, you'll never be left wanting. I think the power is just right, and then the handling was really what takes the cake here. It's got so much good communication through the steering, as Taycan always had, but you know, incremental betterment here, and this Active Ride especially. I mean, I don't think there's any combustion saloon in the world, I've said this before about Taycan, that can really match it. Once it gets going, once you're in a stride with it, it is absolutely unstoppable. And then you kind of understand why they went and made something like the Turbo GT. Rear wheel steer, I've never been quite sure about. I think it definitely reduces the feeling of size in a longer car, and the Taycan is a long car. I think it makes the handling feel a bit less pure. In Taycan, I'm not 100% sure it's absolutely needed. It's a separate option to Active Ride, and I think you can just leave it unticked. I love the sports electric sound. I wish they'd doubled or tripled down on it. I said that when I drove original Taycan, that Porsche have done it so well. Why not offer, you know, more sound profiles, more customization, you know, a more obvious sound. It's nice though that GTS is the only model that gets, you know, a unique sound for acceleration in sport mode. Really nothing new to report here in terms of handling. It's absolutely superb, but the Active Ride, even while I'm in sport, the fact is that yes, I'm driving more dynamically, but when these horrible bumps in the British B roads come, they're eaten up. Going into normal, and that Active Ride suspension is just absolutely unflappable. I tried it previously in the Panamera, where we had that exaggerated test going over a load of bumps, and the car was absolutely dead still, which is great in that type of test, but proof of pudding has to be in the eating, and it's when you're driving in the horrible roads of the UK and the car is still absolutely unfettered by anything on the road. For me, it's worth the price of entry. You've got to think of the price of the GTS to be in addition to the active suspension, I think you've got to go for it. That's not to say that the standard suspension isn't good. The standard suspension is good. I've tried it in Cayenne and other manufacturers, but here we've got a suspension system that makes everything better in comfort and in dynamic driving, and that's worth the price of entry to me. The other big side of this is, of course, the range, where just that element is going to be make or break for a lot of people who are hesitant to get into either the Taycan in general or EVs, where this is just so much more. I can imagine now in the winter months, we're really going to genuinely get close to 300 miles on a Taycan GTS, which is absolutely brilliant because this is a 700 PS car on overboost, and you're going to get 300 miles of electric range. That is genuinely really impressive. And I'm glad that we're testing this in the UK, albeit with a German car, you know, in winter conditions, because this is the worst that it's going to get. And to be having that range figure after this car has probably been thrashed by a bunch of journalists, including myself. So it's thinking it's going to be doing less, that is very good. So if range is your thing, facelift has got to be the way to go. Now, of course, my last video was all about the Taycan and the EV market crash, and how the Taycan, even though it was the best of the EVs, still has seen a massive dip because of the way people are viewing these types of vehicles now. So the question that you guys are going to ask me is, Raz, are you telling us to buy this car? My answer to you is this: there are many countries, there are many scenarios where buying a brand new EV vehicle is still really beneficial to the people buying it. Those are companies, those are other tax reliefs around the world that are still available, and then it just makes sense to go for the new car. The other scenario where it makes sense to get the facelift, whether that's new or used, because used still viable, is when you want the range. There is no doubt that you're going to get better range. And with GTS, I think if a car has the Active Ride, it's just going to, now with 300 miles, survive that much longer into the future without feeling like an obsolete product, because the previous 200 miles was probably the wrong side of 200. And I think we'll keep this car in good stead in terms of values, at least better than before, going into the future. That being said, if that extra bit of dynamism doesn't bother you, I prefer the look of the pre-facelift for GTS because it gets the full turbo body, and the performance, though yes, the launch control not that far away from a 4S, still damn impressive. So bear those questions in mind. To conclude though, I stick by my view. When it comes to a sporty sedan, the Taycan, particularly with this new suspension and with this power bump in GTS, I can't think of anything out there that can match it. Whether that's new M5, any manner of super saloon or wagon that you want to bring along, bring it, because I think, and I'm still sure, that the Taycan would destroy it. And at the end of the day, whatever you think of the propulsion system, that fact alone just has to impress you. See you next time, guys.